You know, darling, sometimes chaos creates the most beautiful kind of magic. That night at Wembley, it wasn't part of the plan. But then again, the best moments never are.
Freddie Mercury's words would echo through history, describing a moment no one could have scripted. A night where courage, music, and fate collided on the world's biggest stage. It was August 9th, 1986. Wembley Stadium. The final night of Queen's Magic Tour. 80,000 fans packed shoulder to shoulder, their collective roar shaking the very structure of the arena. Everyone felt it. A strange, electric undercurrent, a sense that something unforgettable was about to happen. In the middle of that sea of humanity stood a 17-year-old girl named Sophie Miller, a dreamer from East London. Sophie had saved every spare pound from her job at a small Tesco store just to stand in the back rows of this concert. She wasn't supposed to be here, not this close to the band that had shaped her childhood. But Sophie wasn't the type to stay where she was told to stand. For years, she had sung Queen songs in pubs, cafes, and open mics that smelled of beer and cigarettes. She'd been rejected by record labels, mocked by talent scouts, told she was good but not special. Yet that night, as the lights dimmed and Freddie took the stage in his white tank top and crown of sweat and confidence, Sophie felt something stirring inside her, that this was her moment. The air pulsed with the rhythm of Bohemian Rhapsody. Lighters flickered, tears flowed, and somewhere between the echoes of applause and the heartbeat of the crowd, Sophie made a decision that would change everything.
When I saw her climbing up, I didn't see a fan. I saw myself years ago chasing the impossible.
Freddie's laughter echoed softly as he recalled the moment that would later be replayed on grainy VHS tapes, news clips, and the memories of 80,000 witnesses.
I've always said, darling, the stage isn't a place, it's a universe. And sometimes the universe lets someone new in if they're bold enough to crash the door.
Queen was deep into their set. Radio Gaga had just ended, and the stadium trembled with applause that rolled like thunder. The crowd was breathless, and Freddie, ever the master of energy, let the moment linger, his gaze sweeping over the endless faces. Somewhere near the front, hidden in that vast ocean of people, Sophie Miller was planning something outrageous. For the past 2 hours, she had been inching closer to the front, moving with the rhythm of the songs. Every guitar riff, every drum beat was another step closer to her dream. She had memorized the security rotations, the timing between acts, the rhythm of the guards' distractions, and then the lights dimmed. Freddie sat at his piano. The first soft notes of Love of My Life floated into the night air, tender and vulnerable. Sophie's heart pounded in time with the melody. This was her moment. When Freddie sang Love of My Life, You've Broken My Heart, she moved. One breath, one heartbeat. And she was running. Under the barrier, across the narrow gap, her feet slamming against the cold floor of Wembley's stage. Gasps rippled through the crowd. Security froze. Freddie stopped mid-note. The entire world seemed to hold its breath. And then, instead of fear or anger, Freddie smiled.
She looked terrified and magnificent, like someone who just realized they were finally where they were meant to be.
At that moment, a superstar stopped the show to make room for another.
That moment reminded me why I ever sang in the first place. You can feel truth when someone sings from their soul, darling. It doesn't matter if they're famous or not when it's real, you know. And that night, I knew.
The entire stadium was frozen in disbelief. Freddie Mercury, the king of showmanship, had stopped Love of My Life mid-performance. His eyes, sharp even under the floodlights, fixed on the trembling teenage girl now standing on his stage, Sophie Miller. Security guards were seconds away from grabbing her, but Freddie lifted one hand. A silent command that rippled through Wembley. 80,000 people watched as he rose from his piano, the crowd silent except for the hum of the speakers and Sophie's uneven breaths. "What's your name, darling?" he asked, voice steady but filled with curiosity. "Sophie," she whispered, clutching a crumpled piece of paper in her hand. "Sophie Miller." Freddie took a few steps closer, his expression unreadable. "And what exactly did you have in mind, Sophie Miller?" I just want to sing Love of My Life with you. Just once." For a moment, Freddie said nothing. Then his lips curved into that mischievous smile the world knew so well. "Well then," he said softly, "we can't disappoint the lady, can we?" The crowd erupted, a wall of cheers so loud it shook the ground. Freddie gestured for Sophie to come closer, guided her gently toward the piano and whispered, "Forget them all, love. Just sing to me." The first notes began again. Sophie's voice, shaky at first, found its strength. Pure, unfiltered emotion poured through the speakers, blending with Freddie's golden tone in a harmony that silenced 80,000 hearts. "That moment," Freddie later said, eyes glistening, "reminded me why I ever sang in the first place. And for the first time that night, Love of My Life felt truly alive." The stadium fell into absolute silence. Not even a cough or shuffle of movement dared to interrupt what was unfolding. Two voices, one polished by years of fame and another trembling with raw hope, rose and intertwined under the night sky. The sound was fragile yet commanding. Sophie's tone, untrained but honest, met Freddie's soaring resonance in perfect unison. The echo carried over Wembley's steel frame, through television cameras across continents. People watching at home didn't blink. Even the broadcasters hesitated to cut to commercial. Something about the moment felt bigger than a concert. In the VIP section, music executives forgot their champagne glasses midair. Journalists froze over their notebooks. A few whispered that this might be history in the making. Freddie's fingers danced across the piano keys, softer now, giving Sophie space. He glanced sideways at her and smiled, not as a mentor or celebrity, but as a fellow musician acknowledging someone's truth. As they reached the final chorus, Freddie leaned closer to the microphone, his voice melting into hers like velvet and flame. The entire crowd began to sway. Lighters flickered, tears shimmered. When the last note faded, the silence that followed was deafening. And then, as if the entire world took one collective breath, Wembley erupted. 80,000 people screaming, clapping, crying, united in something no one could name but everyone could feel. Sophie stood frozen, eyes wide, tears streaming. Freddie placed his arm around her shoulders, beaming. "Ladies and gentlemen," he said into the mic, "Sophie Miller, proof that courage is the most beautiful sound of all."
In that instant, she wasn't a fan or a stranger. She was music itself, and that's something you can never plan.
Freddie Mercury leaned back in his chair during the interview years later, eyes distant, the ghost of Wembley's light still flickering somewhere inside them.
Fame comes and goes, darling, but moments, real moments, they live forever. That night she gave one to all of us.
What happened after that duet became the stuff of legend. The next morning, every major newspaper in Britain carried the story. Unknown girl joins Queen on stage, stuns Wembley crowd. Photographs of Freddie and Sophie mid-song filled the front pages. Headlines called it the most magical interruption in rock history. But behind the headlines, there was disbelief. Some claimed it had been staged, a publicity stunt. Others insisted the girl must have been planted by Queen's management. The truth, however, was much simpler. Sophie Miller had done what millions only dream of. She'd broken through the barrier between audience and legend and been welcomed instead of thrown out. Phone lines at Queen's record label lit up. Fans demanded to know who she was. Bootleg cassettes of the performance sold for absurd prices at markets around London. The BBC replayed the footage on every evening broadcast. Within days, Sophie's name was being whispered in the same breath as Freddie's, the girl who'd dared to sing with him. Freddie, amused and secretly proud, watched the frenzy unfold. He refused interviews at first, letting the mystery grow. But when asked later what he saw in her, he smiled faintly and said,
She reminded me that the stage belongs to anyone brave enough to climb it. I just gave her the microphone, the rest was all her.
That generosity, that split-second decision, would change both their lives forever. By Monday morning, Sophie Miller was no longer just a name. She was a phenomenon. The footage of her duet with Freddie Mercury spread faster than any publicist could have dreamed. Every television network replayed the moment. A terrified teenager, a world-famous frontman, and a song that somehow turned into something bigger than both of them. Radio DJs called it the most human moment in rock history. Journalists wanted to know everything, her age, her story, how she'd made it past security. But what fascinated people most wasn't how she got there. It was how she sounded. Raw, emotional, untamed. Her voice didn't just harmonize with Freddie, it belonged next to his. Sophie's tiny apartment in East London turned into chaos overnight. Reporters waited outside her door. Neighbors peeked through windows hoping for a glimpse of the girl who had sung with Queen. Her mother, still in disbelief, would answer the ringing phone and hear the BBC on the other end, asking for interviews. Meanwhile, inside the band's world, something softer was happening. Brian May reportedly said to a friend, "Freddie hasn't stopped talking about her." The band's manager began receiving calls from record labels wanting introductions, including Island Records, the same label that had once rejected Sophie's demo with a letter so cruel it had nearly ended her dream. At first, Sophie hid. The noise was overwhelming, the attention, the headlines, the sudden transformation from nobody to somebody. But one afternoon, a familiar voice broke through the chaos. "Hello, love," the man said over the phone. "It's Freddie." For a moment, Sophie couldn't breathe. "Now, I just wanted to be sure," he continued with that unmistakable warmth. "You're not planning to give up now, are you?" That single call would shape everything that came next. Sophie's hands were trembling as she clutched the phone. Freddie Mercury, the Freddie Mercury, was calling her, not from a press line, but personally. His voice was casual, kind, but carried that same electric confidence he radiated on stage. "Now listen, darling," he said, his tone half playful, half serious. "You've got something rare. Don't you dare let the shark scare you off before you've even begun." That was Freddie. Direct, disarming, and sincere in ways that could catch anyone off guard. He invited Sophie to lunch at a quiet Soho restaurant the next day, promising, "No reporters, no flashbulbs. Just you, me, and a bit of champagne." Purely for courage, of course. When Sophie arrived, Freddie was already seated, sunglasses on, waving a spoon like a conductor's baton. The restaurant staff looked starstruck, but Freddie made sure all eyes shifted to Sophie. "She's the real star today," he declared with a grin. Over lunch, Freddie didn't talk about fame or money. He talked about music. He asked about her influences, her favorite keys, even her songwriting habits. He listened, really listened, in a way few ever did. At one point, Sophie confessed her fear. What if it was just luck? One night, one song. Maybe that's all I'll ever have. Freddie leaned in, his expression softening. "Luck is what happens when courage finds the right stage," he said. "And you, darling, found yours." That afternoon, he introduced her to Queen's management team. Not as a fan, not as a charity case, but as a voice worth hearing. From that moment, Freddie Mercury wasn't just Sophie's idol. He became her mentor, a guiding star in a sky suddenly too bright to navigate alone. Under Freddie's mentorship, Sophie's world transformed from chaos to creation. For the first time, she wasn't chasing a dream. She was living it. He brought her to Mountain Studios in Montreux, the same place where Queen had recorded some of their most legendary tracks. The studio felt like a cathedral of sound, walls humming with ghosts of songs that had changed the world. Freddie watched her step up to the microphone, smiling that mischievous smile that meant, "Prove me right." "Now, darling," he said, crossing his arms theatrically, "forget the notes. I want the truth. Sing it like you're confessing something the world doesn't deserve to hear." That was his magic. He never talked about perfection. He talked about emotion, about honesty. And Sophie delivered. Her voice cracked, soared, broke, then rebuilt itself with every take. Freddie would laugh between sessions, snapping his fingers. "That's it! That's the sound of someone who's not pretending." Behind the glass, the engineers exchanged glances. They knew they were hearing something rare, the birth of a real artist. Freddie guided her not by teaching, but by believing. He'd pace the room, offering bits of wisdom in passing. The album that followed, titled The Leap, became an instant hit. Critics called it the voice Freddie Mercury discovered. But what truly mattered wasn't the sales. It was the soul that radiated from every track. In interviews, Sophie would always say the same thing. "I didn't learn how to sing from Freddie. I learned why to sing." And for Freddie Mercury, that might have been the greatest encore of his life. April 20th, 1992, Wembley Stadium. The air was electric, but different this time. The laughter, the color, the fire that once roared from the stage had dimmed. In its place was something heavier, sacred. It was the Freddie Mercury Tribute Concert, and 72,000 people had gathered, not just to hear music, but to say goodbye. Sophie Miller stood backstage, clutching the same crumpled lyric sheet she had once held as a terrified teenager. 6 years earlier, she had climbed this very stage uninvited. Now she was invited, personally chosen by Brian May to sing "Love of My Life" in Freddie's honor. As she waited for her cue, she could almost hear his voice echoing in her mind. "Nervous, darling? Good. That means it matters." When she stepped onto the stage, the crowd erupted. Not for her name, but for the memory she carried. Behind her, a massive screen flickered with images of Freddie, laughing, performing, living. She took a deep breath, the lights blinding her once again, and whispered, "This one's for you, love." The first notes rang out and her voice filled Wembley. It wasn't perfect, it was human. You could hear the tremble in her breath, the ache in every word. When she reached the chorus, something miraculous happened. The audience began to sing with her. 72,000 voices rising in unison, as if Freddie himself had orchestrated it from somewhere beyond. By the time the song ended, Sophie was crying openly. Brian May stepped forward, wrapped his arm around her, and whispered, "He'd be proud." And in that moment, Sophie realized something she'd never understood before. Freddie hadn't just given her a chance. He had passed her a torch. In the years that followed, Sophie Miller carried Freddie Mercury's spirit with her, not as a shadow, but as a guiding light. Every performance, every song, every trembling note began with his words echoing in her mind. "Safe is the enemy of magic, darling. Never play it safe." Her career flourished beyond anything she'd ever imagined. 15 albums, sold-out world tours, awards, and a voice that came to define a generation of singers inspired by the girl who once defied security at Wembley Stadium. But to Sophie, the fame never mattered. What mattered was the why. She often told interviewers, "Freddie taught me that music isn't about perfection. It's about connection, about making people feel less alone for 3 minutes." In 2016, on the 30th anniversary of that night that changed her life, Sophie founded the Leap Foundation, a nonprofit devoted to helping underprivileged young artists get their first break. Scholarships, mentorships, studio sessions, all funded by the woman who had once been a lost dreamer herself. At the entrance of the foundation's London headquarters hung a bronze plaque engraved with the words, "Sometimes you have to take the biggest risk to find the biggest reward." It became more than a motto. It became a truth, one that inspired countless others to chase their own stages, no matter how impossible they seemed. Every year on August 9th, Sophie visited Wembley. She would stand in the same spot she had once climbed from the crowd and lay a single white rose on the stage floor. When asked once what she thought Freddie would say if he could see her now, she smiled through tears and whispered, "He'd say, 'You did it, love. You took the leap, and you flew.'" And she had.